Thank you for making time for IAG. So, tell us a little bit about your background because it's
Oh
interesting.
my goodness, my background. Well, I graduated from Harvard Law School and actually practiced law in Hawaii where there was no legal gambling whatsoever. But Harvard required the equivalent of a doctoral thesis, and I realized legal gambling is booming and is about to explode. So I then became a professor and started writing about legal gambling and doing a lot of writing and consulting, acting as an expert witness, public speaking, and now I've represented and I've worked with governments and industry all over the world, and it's exploding in ways I never could have known. Started with Indian gambling, because we never even heard of Indian law because the tribes had no money. Once they have money, now this is a big issue. And then I'm always trying to be on the cutting edge. So I've written a couple books about internet gaming, and I went to the sessions here to learn more about esports because yeah, I haven't yet written about esports. And now the skill games that are being parts. So it's really nice to. I actually like these conferences, not just to meet wonderful people like you, but also you just sometimes from the questions you find out things that, wow, the casinos are coming to Japan. Who is going to choose the operator? Are they going to be regulated on the national level or the prefect, the local level? And they're saying both. How is that going to work? Right? So, yeah, and I came to Macau. I went into casinos where there was like two slot machines hidden in the dark corner. And the idea of these magnificent buildings. It's it's also, I think, the next thing, the big change is what Galaxy is doing. I think that the millennials don't really like just gambling. They want to have a whole experience. And so I actually have another theory I came up with in the last couple days, which is for the American operators, like for Steve Wynn, his casino integrated resort is really focused on gambling, food, entertainment, shopping, but he would love to have those people go to Las Vegas because the tax rate is so low. Galaxy doesn't have an operation in Las Vegas, so they want people to stay here and they want them to come back. But so I think I'm going to write about that.
That sounds an interesting line of thought because we do see how Galaxy is oriented towards entertainment and towards keeping guests inside their many
Yes.
hotels. And you do see a lot of things from retail because they do like cheaper retail, they do luxury retail, whereas Win is luxury only. So maybe that's related?
And they have that really, Galaxy has that really interesting food street. And, well, in fact, they call themselves an entertainment company. And the Steve Wynn really is focused on kind of a traditional, older casino patron. And there's no reason for them to be here if he can get them over to Las Vegas, pay an enormously smaller amount in taxes, not have to share it with a junket operator. So I kind of get the feel that some of the American operators, they like Macau enormously, but they also like it to be a feeder for Nevada. I actually did figure out a way to measure the impact of mainland Chinese slowdowns or even visa restrictions on Nevada. Look at Baccarat versus Blackjack. So in 2013, all of the blackjack tables in Nevada won $1.1 billion. All of the Baccarat tables, and there's only 1/9 as many Baccarat tables as there are blackjack tables, they won $1.6 billion. Then came the whole slowdown, and we know how much it hit Macau. Turns out, by 2015, blackjack, of course, is still at 1.1 billion. Baccarat had fallen from 1.6 billion to 1.2 billion. So the slowdown cost Nevada casinos, and we know it's the Las Vegas casinos, because who plays high stakes Baccarat? It cost them at least $400 million a year. Now it's going up again. The danger is if Donald Trump gets into a trade war with China, if he keeps insulting them to the point where they say, okay, we're done. I mean, it could be a shooting war over the oil in the South China Sea. The worst is it could be that China says to Trump, okay, you handle Kim Jong-un on your own. God, we wouldn't want to have a war with North Korea. But China could say, if they get insulted enough, all right, Mr. Trump, if you're going to insult us, we're going to impose visa restrictions again. And two of Trump's largest backers are Steve Wynn and Sheldon Adelson. And I was here the last time they put visa restrictions on. So they could put visa restrictions on going to Macau. They also could put visa restrictions on going to Nevada, to the United States. And now we know how much it would hit. If visitors from the mainland, and it's not just high rollers, but if visitors from the mainland could not go to the United States, the casinos in Las Vegas would lose more than $1.5 billion every single year.
So it looks like China now has a power that it didn't have before, which is their own market. So the Chinese market now is their huge asset, which is a relatively new thing for China.
Yes.
And it will be interesting to see how that plays out with the U.S.
Well, in fact, Macau is the only casino jurisdiction in the world where the regulations on the players is more important than the regulations on casinos. So, of course, there's no sign of it happening right now, but if China decided to close the border with Macau, the place would become a ghost town.
So you were telling me before that you first came to Macau in '86. What was the biggest or the most relevant change in Macau?
Macau in 1986 has almost there's nothing of it left. I mean, there's a little bit, in Central District. I used to like to go up to the top of the tower because you could actually watch the land creeping into the ocean. But it's interesting that after just a few years, it's now, oh yeah, we have these giant super casino hotels. And remember in 1986, there was one operator. The casinos were, for the most part, pretty small and dark and frankly shabby. And then when Portugal gave Macau back, and there was this change in the law so that outside operators could come in. Some of the operators, like Harris, said they looked at what Macau was at the time and said, "Oh, there's no potential here." Right. And I was writing, this is the only legal casino gambling in China. Of course, these are going to be tremendously successful. And I kept writing about that. I wish I had had Sheldon Adelson's money because, and he didn't have stock that you could buy either. Because it was clear to people who really had been following Macau that this was going to have explosive growth. The only question actually for many years was, is there going to be competition? Are they going to open up a casino on the mainland and cut off the traffic? And China doesn't even have horse racing. So I think they've really decided they're never going to have casinos on the mainland.
So in '99, China had been open for 9 years, maybe 10. So it was a long process. Were people afraid that China would wake up one day and say, we're going to go back,
Oh, absolutely. Remember, one of the reasons that the Sands and the other casinos, the first casinos, succeeded, because in 2004, the PRC changed the rules. That was the year that they said tourists could go by themselves anywhere in the world. Up until that time, they had to go in a tour group where they had to have a leader to make sure they didn't do anything bad and they came back. And all of a sudden, the Beijing said, okay, you can travel anywhere you want. Today, mainland tourists are by far the largest group of tourists in the world, both in numbers and in money spent. And that's not even counting Hong Kong is now the 10th largest on its own. And I had been warning for years that, the government in China sometimes does things arbitrarily. And in fact, I was proved right, because they put in those visa requirements on Guangdong and the provinces that were in the south. They said, oh, you can only, instead of daily, you can only visit once a month or once every 3 months. I was teaching gaming law at the University of Macau. One of my students was in charge of the frequent visitor program. She lost her job because there were no frequent visitors. And for more than 18 months, the casinos here were in trouble and scared, because what if it gets worse? And then, without any announcement, it just started being eased. There still is that fear. If you look at what's going on with China, with internet betting on their lotteries, they did the same thing a few years ago. There was, from what I can tell, there was no problem. There was no scandal. There was one Western operator, and they had to stop because the government simply announced, sorry, we're not going to have the internet lotteries. The Minister of Finance puts on his website, well, we're going to have it again. And that is the problem when you have a government that isn't a real democracy. It isn't open. You don't have hearings. Nobody has to give reasons why they're doing things, and you never know when they're going to do it. So I think it's realistic to think that things in Macau are going to continue. But it's not as sure as it is in other countries where there's transparency and we really know who the government is and what they're doing.
So that would be the same problem for the new jurisdictions in Asia, such as Vietnam, even the Philippines. I'm sure the fears are similar.
Yes, I went to Vietnam and talked to a lot of people, and they had great fear of the people who lived there. Said it's kind of like what China was back in the 1970s or something, that we don't know what they're going to do. And the other thing that's pretty common in Asia is the question of whether local people can gamble. So Vietnam is a large country, and the economy is now growing again. They seem, for the most part, there's a lot of them, tens of millions of people who are doing okay. But if you only depend on foreign tourists, well, I've been to the casinos where there are only foreign tourists, and they're very small for a reason. And Korea is now going through where Korea opened up a lot of really nice casinos, and they simply said, sorry, no local people, and some of them are kind of like a ghost town, you know. So they have to change.
And I guess to wrap up, how do you feel the G2E went this year?
I think, well, there's a couple of things about G2E which are pretty amazing. I come every year. I couldn't come last year, so I missed a year. Right. And there were some, again, these significant changes. One was, it's so enormous. I mean, it looks like, I don't know what the count is, but the number of people has to be much greater than it's been. Yeah, I mean, which is great. It is larger. I think that's partly because the economy has recovered. All you have to do is look at all the buildings that are going up here, but also Japan now is going to have it. So there's more optimism. But the other thing that really struck me as strange is there seems to be a competition on who can have the scantiliest clad woman. And
you're definitely right there.
Right? I mean, even 2 years ago, you would not have seen what you see today. There were these, it's not only are they dressed really quite sexy even by Hong Kong or Macau standards, and by mainland standards, it's outrageous. But there was like a little cheerleading group. It looked like a striptease. Yeah. And I took, every year I teach gaming law at the University of Macau, and I bring my students on a tour. And they're all recent graduates, they're lawyers, it's a post-grad. So they're all millennials. And most of the women and even the men were going, this is not right. That, millennials don't really like the idea of using women just as commercial body ads. And so I was pretty shocked to see that, and they were very shocked.
Yeah. Well, were they mostly locals or foreigners?
The students, there's always a few, there's always one or two who are actually from Portugal or the Portuguese-speaking world, and some from Hong Kong, but most of them are from Macau, and probably more than half are actually from the mainland. Right. So if you're from the mainland where dresses are down to the ankles, and you see a woman walking away and you go, I don't know she's wearing anything, that is pretty shocking.
Right. Well, let's hope that they listen to you next year and put some clothes on.
Not necessarily. I'm just saying it's different. Right. Let's call them Brazilian bathing suits. That's what they are looking like.
Well, Nelson, thank you so much for your time. It was lovely talking to you.
Great.
And see you next year, I'm sure.
See you next year. Thank you. Bye.